2:30, baby, won't you meet me by the beam? Too early, maybe later, you could show me things.
Hey guys, this is Jacolia of Jacolia Gems. Thank you so much for once again returning back home, family. If you happen to be new here, I hope that you hear something on today that will persuade you to subscribe. Now, if you haven't already done so, hit that button for me, like the video, comment down below, and share this to your social media platforms. With that being said, let's jump straight into the video, you guys. I am back with more ancestry on my great-great-great-grandfather, John Hughes. And I'm going to need you guys to pay very close attention to everything that I say. I'm not going to be here long. For those of you who know, I made a video a couple of months ago talking about my great-great-great-grandfather, Hughes, who was born in Iran. Now, we know that Iran is nothing less than ancient Mesopotamia, and this is where the Hebrews were drawn out of. And when you begin to look into archaeology, they were called the Habiru, Habiru, and according to some, the Apiru, Aipru. We also see that these people had correlations to the Shashu of Yahweh that was seen in ancient Egyptian iconography, with the Egyptian soldiers whipping these Shashu of Yahweh and sending them into chattel slavery. Chattel slavery is not something that is new and foreign to the ancient world. Neither is indentured servitude. I began to share the fact that the Benjaminites specifically were in Babylonian and Persian captivity amongst this land and these people groups. When you begin to look into the book of Esther, although for some, they really don't believe in the book of Esther. Her original name was Hadassah. That was her Hebraic name. And Esther was her Babylonian name. And we know that that is rooted in Ishtar, where we begin to see the celebration of Easter, the Queen Mother, fertility deity with the eggs, which we know represents the fertility of the woman. Then when you get into rabbit, and when you look into ancient Egypt and the hieroglyphics, and when you begin to see her name represented, it's represented by RBT. So all of these things go into one another. When the Israelites were in Babylonian captivity, Esther was planted in amongst the Persians, and she was able to blend in because the Persians come out of Elam, who are also a Semitic group of people. Now, I know that Elam has their own language isolate. This does not deter from the fact that they come out of Shem, making them a Semitic people, sharing similar customs and clearly looking the same. Because when Esther went in undercover, nobody knew that she was a Jew until she revealed herself. We also begin to see that King Saul was a Benjaminite as well, and he was known to be a warrior, which was very surprising when David came in from Judah and he was able to slay more than this Benjaminite. We began to look into the New Testament. The Apostle Paul, he was a Benjaminite from Sicily, from Italy. He was a Pharisee, whom were the teachers of the law. The Benjaminites were not people to be played with when it comes to warfare and when it comes to knowing the laws, statutes, and edicts and commandments of the Most High. Now, we also see that the Benjaminites took part in some abominable sin as far as homosexuality. When I talked about my other grandfather, 10 or 13 generations removed, who was the mayor of London. His name was Leonard Halliday, in case you want to begin to look into him. And he was one of the founders, one of the 125 merchants of the East Indian Company. And that's very important to know, because the East Indian Company founded the Indian Ocean slave trade. And my great-great-great-grandfather, John Hughes, was amongst those people group that existed in the same lands that my other grandfather was running the Silk Road passage through to begin to trade opium. Yeah, drug dealers. They were Freemasons. Sephardic Jews and Moors. They traded silk. They traded food. They traded people. And so when you begin to look into this Indian Ocean slave trade, it took place on the Swahili coast, Tanzania, Zanzibar, the land of blacks. And this is where Israelites were left over due to the captivities that I began to name. The gross sin that the Benjaminites took part in biblically was seen when they took part in homosexuality, to the point where this man and his concubine were in the land, and they wanted to grape him, and he threw out his concubine instead, and they graped her to the point that she was basically dead. And he chopped her body up into 12 different pieces and dispensed it to the 12 tribes of Israel, and they came in and waged war against the Benjaminites because of this homosexuality. Now, when we begin to look into my grandfather, Leonard Halliday, who founded Mooresville, which very identical to the biblical Goshen, or Virus, according to Manetho and Josephus. He took a swampland, and I've stated this before, just like the Moors and Jews did in Mound Bayou, Mississippi, when they came over here to colonize the land. It was completely swamps, and they built up hospitals and farmlands and churches and schools. My grandfather, Leonard Halliday, did the same thing in London, in the East, and he founded Mooresville. And Mooresville at nighttime was full of so much homosexuality that at that point King James sent an edict through my grandfather to begin to say that these people will be unalived. Why is this important? Because we will see that Benjamin, Dan, and Zebulon began to be seen amongst each other, and some other conglomerate groups as well. So when I look into my great-great-grandfather Hugh, he was in the house with my grams when she was a little girl. She got to meet him. He was a free farmer, you guys. And he came over here in the 1800s. This is when he was born. The nationalization law allowed him to become a free citizen of the United States. It's very important to know that the nationalization law was not placed into law until 1790. And this law was only applicable to free Europeans. They were not allowing Native Americans and others to become naturalized citizens. This was specifically for European immigrants. So how did my grandfather become nationalized as a so-called black man? Because he was classified as mulatto. And I know many people are like, well, mulatto just mean if you mix with black and white. Let's get into the etymology of this word. So mulatto goes back into a word, mulawad. And mulawad means, according to the Hispanic Academic Dictionary, one who was sprout up or begotten amongst Arabs, which we know means mixed and mingled, who comes out of Esau as well as Ishmael. And we know that the first Arabs were Jokatan, who comes out of the seed line of Shem. We also know that there are some Cushitic Arabs who began to inhabit the Arabian and Peninsula through Cush. So when we begin to look into this, it begins to say those who were brought up and raised amongst the Arab, but were not of Arab blood throughout the Arab domination of Spain. It also comes from another word called Malawa, who has the exact same definition, but it was specifically talking about the indigenous Christians, meaning first Christians, who inhabited Spain, whom were forcibly converted to Islam and Arabianized. Now, when we begin to look at the indigenous Christians, the first Christians are Jews who inhabited Spain. Spain for Sephardim. So Sephardic Jews whom inhabited Spain were referred to as mulattoes. Let's begin to continue. Now, when we begin to look into the racial mix of these people, whom identified as black, and ethnically they were Hebrew. I'm going to play a video at the end of this to begin to explain how when people, because mulatto was also to categorize those who were from the so-called Middle East, and the reason I say so-called is because the Middle East is a new term that was created, I believe, in either the 1940s or the 1960s. I'm gonna link everything below. Y'all already know that we come in source heavy. The Middle East does not truly exist. This was propagated after the Bath Lord Declaration, which was instituted by the Edomite Rothschilds of Great Britain. Their red star, we have to begin to line up history with biblical narrative. So they created the Middle East because after the Ottoman Empire fell in 1923, a large part of it stayed in Northeast Africa, which created the split, the right leg and the left leg that we see in the statue in Daniel. So many people are so stuck on Catholicism, and then other people are so stuck on Islam, but we really need to see that there are two legs and that there are 10 toes to the statue and to these nations. So yes, Catholicism is one side, but so is Islam. And when we put them together, we have the Neo-Ottoman Empire that's actually attempting to come back to this day. So when we begin to look at the Islamic influence on these mulattoes, they became Arabianized. Then they began to mix with Berbers as well as Arabs, which caused them to become not wholly Israelite, but they were still mixing with other Semitic people. We need to also realize that when they mixed with other European, more times than not, these were swarthy Europeans. What if I began to tell you that Europeans were talking about Jews and Moors and people of color, because Caucasians came from the Caucasus mountain and their word ends in Asian. And when we begin to look at European history, it is very, very, very black. Benjamin Franklin began to say that Spain, Italy, German, the Netherlands, and France were very swarthy or tawny. And these words literally mean dark, sooty, black. And he said the only people that were considered white to him were the English and the Anglo-Saxon. But when we even began to look into a lot of our history, we know that Sephardic Jews and Moors were also in England, but they were able to pass even more. Case in point, my grandfather, Leonard Holiday. It's a lot of history. So when we begin to look into the word mulatto, in this video that I'm gonna post, this refers to the Moorish inhabitants of Europe. And so with my grandfather being classified as a mulatto, this is how he was able to still come over and maintain his freedom. The word mulatto was also applied to new Christians, to anyone who rejected Islam. No one who was Arab was able to be identified as mulatto. When Arabs was coming over here, they were actually reclassified as white. This gentleman in the video that I'm about to play is going to line up all of this. So when we began to look at my grandfather Hugh, I took it up on myself because in my mind I was just like, okay, he's from the tribe of Benjamin, possibly just because of everything that I said. However, that was not enough for me. I needed some more, because we have been told that those of us in the diaspora, specifically America, that there's no way for us to find out who our people are from, that there's no way for us to line up oral tradition and to sign up for these services, Ancestry.com. I haven't taken a DNA test. I've been looking through birth records, baptism records, census, slave schedules, Quaker lists, boat schedules, so on and so forth, to find out my true family's oral history. When I began to look at the Hughes family emblem, it was a few of them. One of them was represented by the floral de lis. This is the French lily flower that we began to see in France, and we see this a lot in Haiti. We see this a lot in Louisiana. This was the representation of the House of Bourbon and seen amongst the French Revolution. We need to know that Benjamin was definitely in France. It's also very important to know that the Sephardic Jews that went into France colonized Africa. So a lot of Africans speak French as well, and we see this in Haiti as well, amongst the Haitian, the Dahomey, amongst the Igbo, and this is where you begin to get a lot of the Creole languages as well. When we look even into Benjamin coming over here, I'm not a subscriber of the 12 tribes chart. I will definitely say, after studying more, I can see why people begin to break things down the way that they broke it down, but they exclude West Africa, and they do not give out all of this scholarship to say why they think this is this, X, Y, and Z. So when we begin to look into the dispersion of the Benjaminites and knowing that these are Moors, when we look at who the Maroon are in Jamaica, we will see that the Maroon also are Moors. They were known to be free or to be wild or runaway slaves who participated in guerrilla warfare. And the reason that this is important to know is because on one of my family crests, the Hughes crest, it was represented by a red hand. Now, the red hand was representation of kingship and warriorhood. This is seen on Zara's family crest in the kingship and the lineage of King David. And this begins to line up with Queen Esther, Queen Hadassah being from Benjamin, and Saul being from Benjamin. This also lines up with the Moors that I just talked about, the Maroons creating guerrilla warfare in Jamaica. So we have to begin to look at all of these. It leads us also into the Maroons and to the Sambo. On the family crest, it was represented by a black wolf. And when I looked up the crest for Benjamin, it's represented by a black wolf as well. And Lobo means wolf. The Sambos were called Lobos. And they were called this because they were also considered to be a mulatto. Anyone mixed of African, Native American, and Swahili European ancestry. So we have to line up all of these things to connect all of these people groups to prove that we are the same people in different areas of the world. So I also began to see the 5-pointed star on my family crest, and we know that the Moorish star is a 5-pointed star. This lily was considered 6 points, and it began to be replaced by the 5-pointed star and the Moorish emblems. So you guys, I just want to encourage somebody out there to begin to do some deep digging and deep diving into your family history so that you can solidify and prove that this is who you are. My great-great-great-grandfather also had a daughter who was passing, and this is according to my grandmother. She said she looked like a white woman. We need to know that Europeans were swarthy, black, Hebraic people. And I'm not saying that Gentiles didn't exist. Where did they come from? When did they come in? What are their phenotypes? What are their genotypes? Like, what is our true history? If we were ruling in Spain alongside Arabs and everything, don't you think that they had to go in there and whitewash history for it to look how it looks now? So when you see your favorite actors and actresses and they have these accents and all of these are proof of black Europeans. So yes, we were all pushed out of the motherland and dispersed. Some of our history will lead us over into Europe before it leads us directly back to Africa. We have to do some tracing to our migration processes and see, are we a part of the Afro-Iranian Jews who were still worshiping and keeping pre-exilic practices, you know, when they were worshiping Yod-Heh-Wav-Heh alongside his asterisk, and when they were still setting up their altars and sacrifices, and they didn't know about Christ because they didn't go into all of those captivities. And we have to know about the different splits, the different sects, the different cultures of the Judaic religion and cultures. So yeah, I'm gonna put that video. I'm gonna share some family crests, and y'all are gonna see that this side of my family, the Hughes, are from the tribe of Benjamin. Thank you guys so much for coming once again. I really hope that you enjoyed this video, and please listen to the follow-up. This is Jacolia of Jacolia Gems signing out. Food for thought.
My mother is lighter than I am. In Egypt, people are identified by the religion first, not the race. So in Egypt, if you are Christian, you are a minority person. But if you're black, you're not a minority person. You are a part of the mainstream society. And I came from this background. And in Egypt, you identify as Arab and as Muslim. And in this country, when I first came, I identified myself as Arab American and Muslim first. And gradually, I became to identify myself as black. I came to the U.S. in 1978. And I became U.S. citizen in 1985. When I became a U.S. resident, I was told by the Immigration and Naturalization that I am white. And I told them that I'm black, and they said, no, in this country, you are white. All Arabs in this country, all Arab immigrants are white. I didn't pay much attention in the beginning to this, because in the Arab world, we identify with our ethnicity first as Arabs, and then with the race second as black or white or whatever. But in this country, you identify with your racial group first and then with your ethnicity second. Gradually, I became black first and Arab second. And I rejected my white classification publicly for the first time in 1987, in February, as a panelist in a function sponsored by the Association of the Study of Black Life and History in Detroit. I said that I belong to two minority groups. I'm Arab American and Black American, and I'm racially black and ethnically Egyptian. I was harassed by my employer right after that. I work for a white school district. The superintendent is white. All the associate superintendents are white, even though that we provide services to 30% black population. But the organization is white and the approach is very white. The attitude towards me changed completely after I went out publicly and rejected my white classification. One coworker came to me and told me, a white coworker came to me and told me right after the function that he met with the superintendent, and if I don't keep my mouth shut, my educational career is over. He said, you have nothing to do with these people, you have a history and a culture. These people came from the jungle, you have nothing to do with them. These people lie and steal. When I see one of them in my neighborhood, I call the police. And I was told by the director of general education, who is retired now, in '88, I was told by him that I get people angry when I say that I'm black Egyptian. If I just say that I'm Egyptian, I would get along. I have to add that I was denied promotion twice because I chose black classification.
Black's Law Dictionary, Free White Person, 4th edition.
Free white persons includes Moorish inhabitants of Spain.
Free white person does not mean Caucasian, or Aryan or Indo-European race. Refer to Federal Directive 15.
We're all children of the earth. So why in the hell are we tearing down each other's worth? Ain't none of my business, baby, what you do. Long as you have